Hello everyone, this is Gabriela Bulgaru, PhD at Babeș-Bolyai University from Cluj-Napoca, Romania. And in this presentation, I will talk about translation competence and the rise of neural machine translation and how it has brought the linguistic competence back on the translation stage. After a short introduction, I will describe how scholars perceived and defined translation competence in the past and how it is conceptualized at present. I'll give some information about neural machine translation and its current adoption by language companies, professionals, and academic institutes. Then I'll shortly talk about the methodology I used in my research to find out how translation competence is actually put at work when fully post-editing machine-translated texts in Romanian. I will present the findings and, of course, the conclusions. Translation studies has a long past but a short history, and we say so because however old it is as an activity, it was only with the second half of the 20th century that it started to be regarded as a scientific discipline. Nowadays, translation studies is an independent science field and there is much research done and of course much more to be done. Special attention was given to translation competence, meaning the knowledge and skills translators need to be trained in so that they deliver a qualitative translation and meet clients' expectations. It is very important to mention that translation is not only an academic discipline, but also a business, and that translation competence is difficult to be defined. We will see that translation competence has continually enlarged its conceptual framework and gradually evolved from a unique competence into a set of interrelated competences or subcompetences. In the post-industrial era, translation was considered a matter of linguistic competence, since translators work with linguistic codes and need to master the total amount of possibilities to understand, recognize, build, and fill the constructions of both the source and the target language. It was also perceived as an innate skill or as a bilingual asset, a sort of professional bilingualism, more conscious and more organized. In the information or modern era, translation competence was seen not only as an ideal bilingual competence based on introspection in search of the necessary knowledge and perhaps the process needed to translate, or as an expert competence having a knowledge base and an inference mechanism, but also as a multi-component communicative competence, including grammatical competence, social linguistic competence, discourse competence, and strategic competence. Later on, the functionalist scholars define translation as a scopus-driven or purposeful activity. The multi-component approach of translation competence was thus reinforced. It was defined as a set of interrelated competences in terms of knowledge, skills, awareness, and expertise. Several models or frameworks of translation competence have been developed since then. One of the most known models is the one elaborated by Pacte Group in 2003, the holistic dynamic model of translation competence, including 5 subcompetences with a strategic subcompetence in the center, connected with the bilingual, the extra-linguistic, the knowledge about translation, and instrumental competences, all of them under the influence of the psychophysiological competence. Another model was the one elaborated by Göpferich in 2009 with similar elements to the previous model, with the strategic competence in the center again, but this time together with motivation, connected with other 5 competences or subcompetences, the communicative competence in at least 2 languages, domain competence, psychomotor competence, translation routine activation, tools and research competence. What is new in this model is that Goffrich also brings into discussion the role of translation norms and translation assignment, also the translator's self-concept or professional ethos, again the psychophysical disposition, and other factors such as external sources of information and the tools available, and the working conditions such as time pressure. In the same year, European Masters in Translation work group proposed another framework of competences. This was made up of 6 competences with the translation service provision in the center, together with language, interconnected with language, intercultural, info mining, technological, and thematic competences. What is different in this model is that we can see in the center the translation service provision, and this means that the accent is put on translation as a business activity. This model was upgraded, and the European Masters in Translation launched a new framework in 2017, including language and culture, translation, technology, personal and interpersonal, and service provision competence, all of them on the same line. We can see how the landscape of translation competence changed and grew over time from a unique competence based on introspection or expertise towards a multi-component but still unique communicative competence, and then to a set of interrelated competencies. We also see how nowadays it has englobed more and more new competencies required on the market, such as business, management, entrepreneurship, domain hyperspecific knowledge, artificial or digital intelligence. We can also easily observe how it is following market trends and requirements, and how it needs to adapt through lifelong learning. Even though at the beginning the translation competence was mainly and essentially linguistic, now the linguistic element is only one element among many others. Apparently, it is not given the central place or role anymore. But with the rise of neural machine translation in 2015, the situation seems to change again. Neural machine translation results were above expectations, much better than what all the previous machine translation systems could obtain in the last 65 years or so. It uses recurrent neural networks and deep learning algorithms, plus other algorithms or mechanisms, such as the attention mechanism, that hugely improve the output. And this output still has different degrees of quality because it depends on the language pair, the source and the target language, the linguistic data sets, meaning the parallel texts usually it has available to train with, the type of text, or the domain. Anyway, post-editing is still compulsory if we want to obtain the quality similar to human translation. Just a quick overview of the results of the European Language Industry Survey published this year. According to this survey, neural machine translation is already implemented or used by 58% of language companies, more than 70% of the independent language professionals use it to some extent, more than 60% of the academia or training institutes adopted it, and there are others who plan to do the same thing. Within this context, we wanted to make the quality assessment and evaluation of neural machine translation from English into Romanian to see what errors and neural machine phenomena, neural machine translation phenomena are produced in the output in Romanian, what competencies are put at work more when post-editing and revising neural machine translation. To this purpose, we compiled an English news corpus that we translated in Romanian using Google Translate, which is said to be the best engine working with low-resourced languages due to its large database to train with, and Romanian is a low-resourced language. We obtained a corpus of almost 7,000 words that we divided into segments, and we fully post-edited and evaluated it using the harmonized multidimensional quality metrics and dynamic quality framework for the quality assessment of neural machine translation, elaborated by Qt Launchpad and Tao's team in 2015. With this model proposes 8 dimensions for assessing errors in translation: accuracy, design, fluency, local conventions, style, terminology, verity, and any other error. If you are curious to see how fluency dimension looks like, here it is, with many categories and subcategories of error. It's a complex picture to look at, but in the same time quite organized. So we analyzed word by word, punctuation mark by punctuation mark, both in the source and in the target language, and we identified 501 errors in almost 7,000 words of machine translated output in Romanian, with different degrees of severity: critical, major, minor, neutral, depending on the impact it had on the content and the translation functionality and on its potential readers. The highest error percentages were accumulated by accuracy and fluency. Just to make it clear for everybody, accuracy refers to content equivalence made in translation, while fluency deals with language and its good functioning. We found out that the great majority of fluency errors are linked to grammar, part of speech, word form, verbal tense, word order, etc. A big number of errors were related to language functioning, cohesion, and ambiguity, but also to punctuation and spelling. Another interesting finding was that there were fewer critical fluency errors compared to accuracy, but the number of major fluency errors was bigger, and the number of minor errors was almost double than the accuracy errors, minor errors. This might be a cue for the difficulty of post-editing fluency errors, which may take similar time and effort as for the accuracy errors post-editing. So, the general conclusion is that the post-editing process is cumbersome and the workload is considerable. The great number of fluency errors make the neural machine translation output in Romanian be of poor quality, unfortunately. Thus, the effort of post-editing is tremendous in order to attain the necessary quality for publishing, for example. Translators need a very strong linguistic competence in order to solve not only grammar but also ambiguity, cohesion, coherence, and reformulation issues. Post-editing certainly calls for a refocus on linguistic competence in students' translation training, competence whose importance was somehow diminished in the last years under the interference of other newer competences that came around. given the type of text, in our case journalistic text, and of course the translation aims, pre-evaluation of neural machine translation appropriateness would be very helpful in order to avoid the process of post-editing that is more time-consuming than the process of translating from scratch. Neural machine translation usage also draws attention to the difference between translation competence and translator's competence. As we saw in the resuming picture, one may wonder which is the specific translation competence, because we know there are people who can be good businessmen and managers and artificial intelligence literate but do not know how to properly translate. We also know that new generations are digital born, so digital skills are not something special or specific anymore in order to translate. Moreover, such skills are already looked for, also presupposed in all domain fields. Thus, we go back to the linguistic competence. But then again, we know that freelance individual translators do need business skills in order to practice their profession. At this point, we make the distinction between translation competence, translators' competence, and even professional translators' competence. But this would be another topic of research and discussion. That's it for now. Thank you for your attention. If you would like to get in touch with me, please write me an email and I will be looking forward to hearing from you.